Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Of course, we have a very special guest today. Pretty unique video just because I haven't had an interview quite like this, but just our newer thing we're doing on the channel is we are doing some simple housekeeping before we introduce our guests. So a couple things I just want to show you as we share the screen. So a couple of our ancillary businesses are, of course, Utah Non-Legal Probate Services, which is a lot of necessary aftercare, or some people call it after death services. If you go to our website, of course, you can look at those services and our fees. Of course, we also own Ogden Layton Estate Sales, which is estate sales and liquidations for personal property. And we also specialize, as I pull up the next website, unless I closed it, I might have closed it. Well, you guys can look up my website. It's been shown a million times on here. Of course, if you haven't liked and subscribed, if you could please jump on the YouTube channel and do that real quick, that would be great. So our guest today is Michael Williamson. As you can see, there's his bios here on Amazon. Michael is a real estate broker. He has been a real estate broker out in California for probably longer than I've been alive, because I'm 35. So I think you've been doing it longer than I've been around. But I'll tell you, I came across Michael's book, Your Home and Divorce, and I want to preface this real quick for those of you in the audience. I've done a couple of courses, a couple of real estate designations, such as the RCSD and the CDRE, if we have some agents that watch this. And I'll tell you, I thought this book of the ones on the market was more beneficial than those courses. And I might criticize those courses more in the video. We'll see. And there's only a handful of these books, but I'll tell you, I see agents really mess up divorce transactions so much. And there's some simple stuff in here that obviously the book is written for couples that are in the middle of a divorce, but I think it's just as beneficial for real estate agents to read. But we'll stop this sharing. And Michael, I'm really curious if you could share with us how you came up with the idea of the book and kind of your experience with the divorce in real estate.
Well, just to back up, there's been people that have said, I wish I had this book before I got married. But
Yeah.
well, it actually started, I've got way too many clients and I was all of their best friends. And I had several in divorce and they asked the same questions and made the same stupid mistakes over and over. So, and at that time I came out with a ghostwriting company that was writing books and I just put my name on the cover and I came up with this book here. This was the first version. You can see that at all. And I put my name on the cover, ordered 20 copies, and I actually read it. It was absolute trash. And it wasn't, it was nothing, it was just lies and misinformation. So I said, well, I'll do my own. And so I wrote my own and just a homemade cover and got it on Amazon and started shipping around. Well, this guy named Robert Allen, have you heard of him? Wrote many real estate books. He's sold 60 million copies. He's 8 times New York's bestseller. He coaches people like Rich Dad Poor Dad, the chicken soul soup guy, Tony Robbins, all help sell him the book. And he called me up and said, hey, Mike, I think your book really needs to get out there. I read your copy and I want to make it a bestseller. And I said, well, go for it. He goes, well, it's not that easy. You need to rewrite it. You need to put the professional touch on it, which I came up with this book. And let's see, where do you want to go from there?
Well, I think there's something you mentioned at the beginning, the ghostwriting company, because in my business, if you've seen it, we're pretty much split half and half now, where I do manufactured housing or I do the senior transition housing, which is where the probate trust and conservatorships come up. Divorce just comes up in general, and about a quarter of your divorces, and I think this is talked about in your book, are what you call silver or gray divorces, basically senior citizens. And that rate has been climbing every year, whereas overall divorce is down because marriage is down. But amongst the baby boomers, it is on the rise. But there's a lot of companies, like you mentioned the ghostwriting thing, that will tell agents, oh, buy these copies of books for sell by owners or probate or inherited property. There's a couple of big ones that there's a newer one that got really big during 2020 when the market was booming. But I've looked at them, and what you said is absolutely correct. I don't think people who are going to sit down and read a book are going to be tricked into thinking, oh, you really sat down and wrote this. And the information is never accurate, especially if you're trying to do something local to your market. So I thought that was really interesting because, again, it's really pitched for people who get into these specialized niches in real estate and just for the general public. I think that's something you should look at. If you purchase a book, did the person who's named on the cover, did they actually write it? That's, I think, a really big deal to someone's credibility. Well, tell me a little bit about just the marketing of the book. You said this is like the final iteration. It's obviously on Amazon. What were some other things you did to get the book out there with, you said Robert Allen, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, he wrote the foreword in the
Okay.
book for me. That was a big kicker. Marketing is all about just sending books, getting online and all that stuff. And keep in mind, this was a bestseller in 2020, so that was 4 years ago. And I just had to hustle, get everybody I could to buy it. You know, favors, people would buy one or two or three, give them away. And I got to number 10 for a split second. And then that really wasn't my goal. I just wanted to see how well I could do because, and you don't mind me segueing, the book I really want to write is about houses, real estate, and probate, trusts, wills, and all the crazy things people do about that. I just can't find a name for it. And so far, if I had to do it, I'd say your home after death and all the messes it creates. But it just doesn't have, if I had a title, I'd have this book out by the end of the week. But
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, obviously on this channel, I talk a lot about probate and senior transition housing. It's for the standard homes, it's the majority of my business. And obviously, you saw the ancillary businesses that I have, and that is really an a la carte concierge service. What I have found with some attorney friends, and then of course some other real estate professionals in the country, is that the probate trust and will is this area that just keeps growing. I know several attorneys that are shifting away from family law and more towards estate planning or estate settlement just because there's much more work and it's not as emotionally taxing. Unfortunately, divorce is reality of life. So again, I want to mention that just it's important to know, even if it's not your specialty, because it's going to come up in people's careers and people are not versed in these things. With the probate trust and wills, I'm curious what you mentioned, of course, you've already got that written. What inspired you to do that book?
well, that was really the one I really wanted to do first. But so the divorce book was a test.
Mm-hmm.
So I got all the functions working now. The functions have all changed. So the book's not actually written. There's a lot of the stuff is going to be similar with the divorce book. I've just got some new stories that are just wicked. Like example, one of my clients' ex-girlfriend from 7 years ago, what they call it, when they schmooze a relative, his uncle,
Mm-hmm.
and actually snuck in and had him sign over the trust, the will, and a reverse mortgage. And my friend didn't find out about it until after the statute of limitations. So he could overturn the trust and the will, but the divorce, the money she took out of the reverse mortgage is just gone. So that's just like page two of
Yeah.
the story that I'm writing with him about it. It just goes on, just gets, and it's just something people really need. And also the difference between divorce is when you go in divorce, you know what's going on. You kind of are a little bit guilty one way or the other. You got to take some blame. But with estates, you don't know what's happened. Your loved one just dies and you don't know what the trusts are about. You don't know anything about this or that. Probably a lot of money these days. And you've got all those emotions going, which is my first chapter called Follow Your Heart, which is great for, love songs and poems and stuff. But it's, keep that out of the real estate business because it's about the money when you're in these kind of situations, because that's what you're going to have at the end. The attorneys will bleed you dry, as you know. Michael Jackson, Elvis, Prince, their estates lasted 10 years. Now, I've got friends who have estates that are on year 5, and it's not anywhere getting close. It's like they just budget how much money is in this estate, and that's their goal. And then they settle. And one of the chapters in my book, or both books, is going to be about attorneys, how to deal with attorneys. with the first book, the purple book I wrote, it got into my real estate attorney's hands, and he says, Mike, let me rewrite that. Everything you said is spot on. That's worth $100,000 right there, just that chapter. And he took it off to the next level. He said some things that he should get disbarred for, but so it's a lot of insider information and stuff like that too. Just like the chapters on what do you do with the stuff. I have a lady who's a clutter expert, and she just does it beautifully. How to just let go of things.
Yeah.
But back to your question, the estates, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more preparation people should do. You should manage your estate long before and keep up to date. One of the biggest mistakes people make is in their estates, as you know, is they don't put the stuff in the trust. That's what happened with Elvis. He had this trust, but he didn't put all the stuff in there. So there's a lot more mistakes that people can make with trust, and there's a lot more. Anyway, you know better than I do. So that's I'm hoping to.
Oh yeah, it's just people will sometimes have just a will, and that's obviously not good enough. They have to have trust set up, but there's so many times, even if they have a trust, where they miss something in the trust, and they still have to go through the probate court because some life insurance policy wasn't applied, or oh, we forgot to add this piece of land my dad had. So it still has to go through the process if it's not included in the trust. Like you said, the stuff. Couple of thoughts when it comes to cleaning out the place. You talked about the clutter management. It's like we have a senior move manager that works for the estate sale company, and because sometimes there's people still living in the home, have to pack, sort through things, and it is arduous. I have one right now. I have a transaction, and it's funny. It started off as a probate thing where the husband's mom had passed away, and it was her house. They lived there, took care of her, but it's been 8 years, and they finally called the estate sale company because they wanted to do an estate sale. And then, of course, I'm a real estate broker, so they want to sell the house. But during this process, him and his wife have all of a sudden had marital problems, and it's turned into also a divorce transaction. And it's really interesting how it's coincided, because if I had known that was going to happen up front, I would have done a couple things differently, but just no clue because we were called on the estate side of things. One of the things we encourage people to do, and I'll share my screen because pretty much on any listing I have, and even to some resource partners, we do send a letter to like kind of almost like circle mailers and such, asking people if they have a will, and we'll set up a free consultation because I have a few attorney partners. What I have found is people struggle to get the concept of different trusts wrapped around their head, or they think, oh, I don't have enough stuff. I don't need to do that. At the bare minimum, I tell people at least have a will. Because I'll stop sharing this. I had a transaction earlier this year where, lady passed away, and I've mentioned it on the channel before. No surviving children or relatives, no will, no trust, nothing. So, they sold her stuff, paid off the debts, and whatever was left over went to the state of Utah, which is shameful, just absolutely shameful.
I've had several experiences with deathbed wills, including my late wife. One of her second daughters, she had 5, had the will signed 7 days before she died of stomach cancer, and took everything away from her sisters.
Yeah.
As far as I know, she still has. Yeah. But and several times, like the old guy who marries the young girl, and 6 weeks later he dies, and she's got everything. That happens, and that sticks most of the time.
Yep.
Even if that signature looks like, across the page, especially if there's nothing else. And I think it's just by date, because that's scary. The trusts basically are just basically a box where you keep your stuff. It basically avoids probate, is its big advantage.
Right.
Which makes it a lot easier if you got some stuff.
No, yeah. And it's going to save a lot of time and money for your heirs and for the estate in general. I think with the will, it's just knowing their wishes for sure.
Right.
And one of the things we've also talked about people doing is, and I'm at some point I'll sell it, but there's a lot of like notebooks you can get where you can put down like your passwords and information, put in the life insurance policy, like these binders. There's a lot of that, like my estate plan. If you don't go to an attorney, there's just basic stuff you can do like that. To wrap it back into divorce a little bit, because it was one of the things in the book that intrigued me when we talk about probate and estates, I think of seniors. What do you think is one of the driving factors? Because I think it's fascinating that this is happening, to see the number of these silver divorces rising. Like, why is that generation getting divorced more? I think that's really interesting. What's your take on that?
Well, just at random, I think people age differently too. One can grow older faster, and the other one just wants to go, just starting to have some fun. I've had couples have kids and grandkids, and then one day the husband says, I rolled over and I looked and I go, who is this woman in my life? Because now he's retired, the kids are all gone, and they've spent so many years wrapped up in their family that they never really got to spend quality time together, and they divorced because they didn't really know who each others who they were. Uh, so that's a good question.
I don't think I've thought of it that way, actually, because it's a big thing that's coming up a lot, and it's coming up more and more in my business. And again, if you just look at some of these national statistics and studies, they're showing that divorce overall is on the decline, but it's still rising within that older generation because they've been married longer, and there's cultural, societal changes obviously that are beyond the scope of this Zoom call. But it's really interesting. And of course, people have talked about the HECM for purchase. If seniors are getting divorced, that's a big thing that people talk about as well. There's a couple of these designations real estate agents can get to basically specialize in divorce. I'm happy to share my opinion, but I'm curious if you have one.
Oh, I'll blanket all of them. Good to start the fire in your fireplace.
Yeah.
I got stacks of them. It's pathetic. I think, like, especially the California Association of Realtors, the DRE Department of Real, there was times where we're required in California to have 45 continuing education courses, units. Back in, 40 years ago, that meant every course was a 3-hour course that you spent 3 hours in a room, basically telling jokes and stuff like that. So at least you showed up. About maybe 2 or 3 times ago, which would be, say, 8 or 10 years ago. It's all online. I took all 45 of the continuing education credits online in 55 minutes.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they were not, a lot of it wasn't even right. You just had to figure out what the California Association of Realtors or the DR Department of Real Estate, what are they looking for? Now, like, well, boy, you want to get into this NAR thing?
And
Who are they? How could they possibly screw up to $500 million,
I have said it, and I had to be careful, obviously, but my real estate attorney and I actually have talked about this because we talked about how I am restructuring our contract here in Utah. Because in Utah, even though they've decoupled it, there's still a part on the listing agreement where you can determine what they would offer for a BBC. It's just not on MLS, but it's like the Department of Justice still has an issue with that. And the thing is, NAR settled. I mean, so we're stuck with it. But I tell people, what's the point of even being in NAR? I will say it. I would love to say it to them. They're losers. I mean,
well,
this was a slam dunk contract law case they lost.
they
There,
killed us with giving our MLS to Zillow in 2005.
yeah. Well,
That
it's
was suicide.
and selling Realtor.com. Thing is,
Yeah.
NAR could have made Realtor.com into Zillow and had a national MLS. They missed the mark. They missed the boat, and they screwed it up. And where private enterprise had to do it. I mean, they totally screwed up. So it's like they're a wannabe union that also wants to be quasi-government. So they don't even, I think they have an identity crisis. Of course, there's been several people who have had to quit because of, sex scandals. So I don't even know the full story and all that. But yeah, if I was going to say overall, a lot of these titles, like these designations, like if someone took a course, it doesn't mean they know what the heck they're doing. And it's not just continuing ed. It's like I took a thing called the Certified Divorce Real Estate Expert. And it was a course, like a private course. It was $4,500, and it was not worth it. I did it mostly just so I could put it on my resume because my resume is
Right. Yeah.
I just
Well, people buy it.
yeah. But I'm just like, this is pathetic. I mean, your book had the same information, if not more, than that course, and your book's $5 on Amazon. You know,
Supposed to be 16.95.
oh yeah. Well, you need to raise the price after this.
Well, that's the sticker price, but I think they don't have many left.
Um, I'm just curious in your business and in your career as a real estate broker, would you say that you had a lot of the probate and trust transactions in your business? And were they some of your more like, is that more of the, I would say more where your passion lies?
No, it's always been, I take them as they come. Basically, most of my career has been real estate development, building subdivisions and stuff like that. It's just I've met so many people over the 42 years in real estate. My line is, how long have you been in real estate? 42, trying to get out for 41. Because it was just a short-term thing. I figured once I make 20 grand, I'm out. But
Yeah,
now it's like I need to make that a month to stay in it, kind of thing. But
yeah,
no, it's not something I'm passionate about. Same with the divorce. I'm not passionate about it. It's just something that needs to get done. And as you pointed out, that it's not. The information's not out there for people, and they still are. I got several couples right now that have read the book, my book, or so they say, but they're still making the same mistakes. They've been
yeah.
divorced for 5 years, and what's going to happen? I don't know, but at least I tried to help them. But it's the age. I call this the age of misinformation.
It is. So much of the stuff you Google to try to figure this stuff out is wrong.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
generated content, and I've
We're
been,
dated.
yeah, I've been shocked at just the amount of attorneys, like on the divorce side, they don't understand how the house works, and what they put in these decrees is wild. The big thing's been happening for a couple of years on old divorce decrees. It's like, oh, you'll refinance in 12 months. Well, interest rates went up. Oops. I mean,
Right,
it's
right,
just like
right.
that to me is just so funny. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily passionate about the stuff I do. For me, I got into the manufactured housing and, of course, the senior and probate stuff because I fell into those by accident, and I realized no one else is doing this. And it was a big need, a big service that I couldn't there at the time. And it's still this way. There were no other agents doing it. Now there's no other broker doing it. I'm the only broker in Utah that does it. But there's a couple of agents that are trying to do the senior thing, but no one's doing the probate stuff. And no one really specializes in the manufactured housing. And again, just fell into it because it was needed. So that sounds similar. What you were saying sounds similar to my outlook on it.
I've actually represented quite a few attorneys. I had one that called. I was telling him what to do. You got to do this. You got to do that. And I'm telling him some legal advice. And he goes, "Well, Williamson, when did you get your license to practice law?" And I said, "I don't practice it. I do it.
That's a good line.
I do it for real." Yeah, this is not practice. This is your life.
I didn't go to law school, but some of it's common sense or just reading a contract. But people struggle, and sometimes people jump through mental gymnastics. It's interesting.
Well, that's another thing with this NAR, and buyers can represent themselves. I can't imagine it, but I think I've got like a list of all the things that we do. It's probably about 8 pages long of
Yeah,
all the little things. And if you don't understand it, contracts are contracts. And if you don't at least know how to find out and figure it out, I can't imagine somebody, especially like in a dirt deal, land deal, or something like that, or commercial deal, representing themselves. And also, I think what I really like about it is the buyer broker thing. We should have done that a long time ago. I
yeah,
think we would have given the buyers a lot more service if we were in contract with them.
yeah. We
Really.
we've had the buyer broker agreement for a long time in Utah, but the problem is there'd be people who would still show homes, not do it until, oh, we're going to write the offer in this house, and they'd send it all as one document together to retain the services while they're sitting in a repsi, a purchase contract. So it's just now they're a bit more strict about it.
There's just so many specialties. If you don't know what you're doing, I don't care if you have a license or not. But most licensees now are just handing it off to their associates. They're just salespeople. They just sign them up and hand them off to their assistant and their listing assistant, their marketing person, their
Mhm.
contract person, their escrow coordinators. But again, service is just taking one more step backwards.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't have an assistant or transaction coordinator. I should, and we're looking at hiring someone to do some back end stuff, but have no interest in that person interacting with my customers.
yeah, well, they do what they do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of little checky boxes to check or not check, and they mean a lot of things. So if you don't keep, and mine keeps me out of trouble. I've got one that always goes through my documents because I'm a big picture guy,
Right.
and she's the detail person, so it works really well for me.
Yeah, and that's what's funny is I used to be, I would say, more detailed oriented, but my business has expanded so to where I do need to pull someone in at the beginning of the year because it's just, yeah, I guess as I get older, I have said this, the mental bandwidth has changed for me.
Right, yeah.
It's deeper on certain things, but I am not as wide as I used to be. I wish I could say that about my weight, but mental capacity, it's like I can go deeper on stuff, but not as wide. And I think there's some positives to that, though. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
Oh, it was an enjoyable conversation. Nice to read talk with a real professional.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
Most of them I just put them out to the in the trash can these days.
well, I that's probably for another video because I got to make a couple calls this afternoon, and I'm not looking forward to the other side. And that's just the way it is in this industry. You get some people that don't understand. It's just a transaction.
Yeah, well, I hope you got something out of this.
Definitely
Are you
did.
thinking about writing a book?
No, no, I thought about it. I've
Yeah.
done creative writing in the past, but I don't have any interest in writing.
Well, I'll send you the draft of my book, and maybe you can put something in there.
I have a couple thoughts on that. I think maybe I could connect you to a couple people on some of that stuff if you don't know them already. I think it would be good for you. How can people best find you online?
MichaelWilliamson.com
Okay,
with the SEN. I say that 10 times a day. Michael Williamson, SEN.com.
okay.
It's my website, and you can go michaelwilliamson@gmail.com for my email.
And of course, if people want a copy of the book, they
Or you can look me up on Google. I probably own the first 5 pages for my little different projects. I little league coach and all sorts of stuff I get into, musician, blah blah blah. But real estate just keeps me going, keeps me alive. It's a job.
yeah, I feel you. Well, I appreciate your time. We're gonna chat once the video stops
Yeah,
recording.
yeah, sounds good.
But thanks so much, folks, for watching, and take care. We'll see you next time.
Been a pleasure. Yeah.